Hello, this is Jerry Davison. In this video, I'll talk about key areas such as the design of your option scheme, which staff should get share options, how many each, and when they can actually buy the shares. At a strategic level, the main aim of option schemes, of course, is to help companies recruit and then retain their best staff. So getting the design right is vital. So which employees should get options? Most of our client companies use EMI schemes to grant options to a handful of key employees, often at director or senior manager level, and perhaps to staff who joined at quite an early stage in the business's growth. Essentially, the choice is up to the board, as the legislation does not actually specify any number or that EMI options must be for all employees. How many options should be granted to each employee? Well, first, the board usually decides to set aside what we call an option pool of a certain size, typically between 10 and 20% of the company's share capital. This is best agreed among the existing shareholders. You don't have to grant all of the option pool immediately. You could grant some now and reserve the balance for future recruits, or even just let the balance expire. Technically, an option pool is just an arrangement on paper. No options are actually granted and created until they're given to staff under an option agreement, and the shares themselves do not exist until the option is exercised and the new shares are actually issued. There aren't any set rules for how many or what percentage of options should be granted to each individual. Again, it's entirely up to the board. One method is to simply grant a percentage of share capital to each employee. Let's say you're recruiting a new CEO for a small but high-growth tech business. You might need to offer up to 5%. But for an MD for a more traditional, lower-growth manufacturing company, you might have to offer 10% to attract the right person. Obviously, the 5% in a successful tech company is likely to be worth considerably more than 10% of a manufacturing company when the businesses are sold. Some company boards base the number of options on the multiple of salary that the employee should achieve on a company sale. The board makes an assumption about the expected value of the business if it was sold in, say, 3 to 5 years, and then work out the percentage required to get the salary multiple. So, for example, if Sarah's on a 75,000 salary and the target was 2 times salary for employees, and let's say the company should fetch 15 million in 3 years, then she would need 1% in options to get £150,000 or 2 times the salary on an exit. Always remember that you can grant additional options down the line to a key employee if they're doing exceptionally well, or if you think you weren't generous enough in the initial grant. So what price should be paid for the shares by the employees? Companies are free to set the option exercise price, and that can be more or less than the market value of the shares, which we will have agreed with HMRC up front for you. The shares over which options are granted must be ordinary shares, although they can be a different class of ordinary share with restricted rights. For example, they can be non-voting shares. And what sort of vesting structure should you use? The basic choice for when the options can be exercised to buy the shares, which is the vesting date, is between some sort of time-based structure, such as vesting on the 3rd anniversary after the options are granted, or an exit-only scheme, where the employee can only buy the shares when the company is sold. There is a separate video on this, and it's worth watching because it's a critical area to think about. Some companies have performance targets for vesting in addition to the normal time or exit-based criteria. Such targets can be used in an option scheme, but have to be designed very carefully to avoid disincentivizing the employees. Note that each employee would have their own option agreement, and therefore variables such as the number of options, vesting periods and price can be different between option holders, dependent on seniority and other factors. It's up to the management and the board to decide on those matters.